Understanding the connection between trauma and disrespect. When we think about trauma, most of us imagine something big and obvious. A painful event, a betrayal, or a moment of deep loss. But trauma is not always loud. Sometimes it's silent, subtle, and woven into the fabric of our everyday lives. Trauma reshapes the way we see ourselves, the way we see others, and most importantly, the way we believe we deserve to be treated. Many of us grew up in environments where love was inconsistent, where approval was conditional, and where respect was something we had to earn instead of something that was naturally given. And without even realizing it, those experiences trained us to accept less than we deserve. If as a child you were made to feel invisible, constantly criticized or ignored, your nervous system recorded those moments. That becomes your normal. So when you grow older and enter friendships, relationships, or even workplaces, your mind subconsciously seeks what feels familiar. Disrespect doesn't feel shocking. It feels like home. It feels like something you know how to handle because you've been handling it for years. And here's the trap. Trauma convinces you that you are strong because you can endure disrespect. But endurance is not the same as self-worth. Think about it. If someone raised their voice at you, dismissed your feelings, or treated you unfairly, and instead of walking away, you found yourself making excuses for them, that's trauma speaking. It whispers lies like, maybe it's my fault, or at least they didn't do worse, or this is just how relationships are. That inner voice is not your truth. It's a reflection of the wounds you haven't healed yet. Spiritual awakening begins when you recognize this cycle. It's not about blaming yourself for what happened to you. It's about opening your eyes to the patterns that are still running your life. But trauma wires your brain for survival, not for joy. It makes you tolerate things you should reject. It convinces you to settle in places you should have left long ago. But awakening means you are no longer willing to let your past write the script of your future. This realization is the first step to say, I see it now. I see how my wounds shaped me, but I refuse to let them define me anymore. Because the truth is, you were never created to accept disrespect as normal. You were created to embody love, strength, and divine worth. Healing begins when you stop asking, why do they treat me this way? And start asking, why do I believe I must stay? That shift in awareness is the seed of transformation. And once that seed is planted, everything begins to change. Recognizing the patterns of disrespect. The first step to healing from trauma and unlearning disrespect is recognition. You cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge. Many people carry unspoken wounds from their past that trained them to tolerate things no soul should ever accept. Trauma plants seeds in your subconscious mind, and those seeds grow into patterns. Patterns of people-pleasing, of over-explaining yourself, of excusing toxic behavior, of shrinking your light so others feel comfortable. Maybe you grew up in a home where love was conditional, where you had to earn affection by being perfect, silent, or obedient. Perhaps you were told you were too much or not enough. Maybe your voice was silenced when you wanted to speak. Maybe you were gaslit into believing that your feelings didn't matter. These experiences train your nervous system to normalize disrespect. Without even realizing it, you begin to believe that this is the way relationships are supposed to be, that love must be painful, that acceptance requires self-abandonment. But here is the truth. The way people treated you in your past does not define your worth, and it does not determine what you must accept in your future. Trauma conditioned you to survive in an environment that lacked respect. But survival is not the same as thriving. To thrive, you must wake up to the patterns. You must recognize when someone dismisses your voice, belittles your presence, or drains your energy. You must notice the moments when you bite your tongue, not because you choose peace, but because you fear rejection. You must pay attention to the times you allow yourself to be last on your own priority list. This awareness is not about blaming yourself. It's about opening your eyes, because healing begins with clarity. You cannot heal what you keep hidden in the shadows. When you shine the light of awareness on your pattern, You start to realize this is not love, this is not respect, and I don't have to keep accepting it. Think of it this way: your soul has always known your value. That's why you feel uneasy when you're disrespected. That's why your spirit aches when you're treated as less. That discomfort is your higher self whispering, "Wake up, you deserve better." You may have ignored that voice in the past, but today, in this very moment, you have the chance to honor it. Recognizing patterns of disrespect is an act of courage. It's not easy to look at your relationships, your choices, and even your own behaviors with honesty. But spiritual awakening is never about ease. It's about truth, and the truth will set you free. The more you recognize these patterns, the more you reclaim your power. Awareness is the first step toward transformation. Once you see clearly, you can no longer settle blindly, recognizing the patterns of disrespect. The first step in unlearning anything is recognizing that it exists. Trauma has a sneaky way of convincing you that the abnormal is normal, that the painful is acceptable, and that disrespect is just the way things are. Many people live their entire lives never realizing that the way they are being treated is not love, not care, not respect, but a replay of the trauma they once endured. And unless you see it for what it is, you can never break free. Disrespect doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides behind smiles and jokes. Sometimes it comes in the form of dismissive comments when you open your heart, or in subtle jabs that leave you questioning your worth. Other times, it's silence when you need presence. It's neglect when you need care. It's being told, directly or indirectly, that your feelings don't matter. But here's the truth. If you grew up in an environment where your emotions were dismissed, where your boundaries were ignored, where your identity was belittled, then disrespect feels like home. It doesn't shock you. It doesn't send off alarms. Instead, it feels familiar. And the human mind often confuses familiarity with safety. You end up staying in spaces where you're hurt because your nervous system has been trained to normalize it. Ask yourself, do you find yourself making excuses for people who constantly mistreat you? Do you downplay your pain just to keep the peace? Do you silence yourself to avoid conflict? If so, those are not just random habits. They are survival patterns rooted in trauma. Recognizing these patterns is an act of awakening. It requires you to step back and say, wait a minute, this isn't love, this isn't respect, this isn't the life I deserve. And while that realization can be painful, it's also liberating. Because awareness is the first crack in the cycle. Awareness is the beginning of healing. Spiritual awakening teaches us that the world outside is often a mirror of the world inside. If you are constantly surrounded by disrespect, it's not always because you deserve it. It's often because you've unconsciously accepted it. And the moment you begin to raise your awareness, you shift the energy. You start sending a signal to the universe: I will no longer tolerate what harms me. This isn't about blame. It's about reclaiming your power. It's about understanding that while trauma may have trained you to accept disrespect, your soul is calling you to something higher. Every time you notice a pattern of disrespect, you are being invited to choose differently, to pause and to remind yourself, I am worthy of love, kindness, and honor. And that is the foundation of unlearning. Because once you can see clearly, you can no longer pretend that mistreatment is acceptable. You cannot unsee the truth. And the truth is this: you are not here to be disrespected. You are here to rise, to awaken, and to live with dignity. Learning to set boundaries and reclaiming your worth. One of the most powerful ways to break free from the cycle of accepting disrespect is by learning the art of setting boundaries. For many people who grew up in environments filled with trauma, boundaries were either ignored, violated, or punished. You may have been taught that saying no makes you selfish, that speaking up is disrespectful, or that protecting yourself means you're unloving. But the truth is the opposite. Setting boundaries is an act of self-love, self-respect, and spiritual awakening. A boundary is not about controlling other people. It is not about pushing people away. A boundary is a clear line that tells the world, this is how I deserve to be treated. It's like putting a fence around your garden. You're not building a wall to isolate yourself. You're protecting the beauty and value inside from being trampled on. Think about it. When you've been trained to accept disrespect, you often feel uncomfortable saying no. You over-explain, over-apologize, or shrink yourself to make others comfortable. But boundaries begin with understanding that you have the right to exist as you are, without needing to bend constantly to the will of others. Your feelings, your needs, your energy, and your peace all matter. And if someone repeatedly disregards those things, you are allowed to draw the line. But here's the challenge. When you start setting boundaries, the people who benefited from your lack of them will push back. They may accuse you of changing, of being cold, or even of being ungrateful. That's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because you're finally doing something right. You're breaking a cycle, and cycles resist being broken. Your job is to hold firm. Boundaries are not for them, they are for you. Spiritually, boundaries are deeply connected to your self-worth. When you say no to disrespect, you are saying yes to your soul. When you stop tolerating behavior that wounds you, you open space for relationships, opportunities, and environments that nourish you. This is how the universe works. What you allow is what you attract. If you allow disrespect, it will multiply. If you choose respect, respect will find its way to you. Practical steps matter here. Start small. If you've been a people pleaser your whole life, you won't suddenly transform overnight. Begin with small acts of self-protection, declining an invitation that drains you, asking for clarity when someone speaks harshly, or pausing before you automatically agree to something. Over time, these small boundaries become strong walls of self-respect. You'll notice your energy shifts, you'll notice your confidence rising, and most importantly, you'll notice that you no longer feel chained to the approval of others. Understand this, boundaries are not about fear, they are about freedom. They free you from carrying what is not yours. They free you from unhealthy cycles, and they free you to step fully into the life you are meant to live, one filled with respect, peace, and authentic love. Reclaiming your power by setting boundaries. When you've lived much of your life in survival mode, boundaries can feel unnatural. You may have been taught to silence yourself to keep the peace, to say yes when you wanted to say no, and to shrink your voice just to avoid conflict. But here's the truth. Boundaries are not walls meant to isolate you. They are gates meant to protect you. Boundaries are how you reclaim your power, honor your worth, and reteach your soul what respect truly looks like. Think about it. When you don't set boundaries, you're essentially giving others permission to cross lines that violate your peace. You allow them to dictate how much you tolerate, how much of yourself you sacrifice, and how much you're willing to endure. But the day you decide that your energy, your time, and your heart are sacred, that's the day you start writing a new story. Setting boundaries begins with awareness. Ask yourself, where in my life do I feel drained? Where do I feel small, unseen, or taken advantage of? Who consistently oversteps? And where have I failed to speak up? These answers will reveal the places where boundaries are desperately needed. The next step is courage. The courage to voice your truth, even when your voice trembles, saying, I will not tolerate being spoken to like that, or I need time for myself, may feel terrifying if you've always been the one to comply. But every time you state a boundary, you're not just protecting yourself. You're healing the younger version of you who never had that power. You're showing yourself that you are no longer a victim of disrespect, but a guardian of your own peace. Boundaries will challenge people. Some will resist them. Some may call you selfish or distant. But remember, those who truly love and value you will adjust. They will respect your no because they care about your well-being. The ones who leave, when you set boundaries, are often the ones who benefited from your lack of them. And though it may hurt at first, their absence creates space for healthier connections, built on mutual respect and understanding. You see, boundaries are spiritual acts of self-love. They align you with God's vision of your worth. They remind you that your soul was never created to live in chains, but to stand tall in dignity. Every time you choose to honor yourself, you break a generational pattern. You say, the cycle ends with me. So today, make a decision. Decide where your energy will go, who will have access to your heart, and what behaviors you will no longer entertain. Because the moment you draw that line, you step fully into your power. You move from surviving disrespect to thriving in self-respect. And that, my friend, is the foundation of true freedom. Rebuilding your life on respect and love, you've come a long way on this journey. By now, you understand that your trauma was not your fault, but it shaped how you saw yourself, how you tolerated disrespect, and how you allowed others to treat you. But here's the beautiful truth. Just because trauma trained you one way does not mean you must stay there. You can retrain your soul. You can unlearn the habits of pain and rebuild your life on respect and love. Rebuilding starts with a decision to no longer let your past dictate your present or your future. It's about making a conscious choice. I will no longer accept disrespect. I will only align myself with environments and people that honor my worth. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but every small step you take begins to transform your reality. The first step in this rebuilding process is creating healthy boundaries. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are gates that allow the right people in. A boundary says, this is how I expect to be treated, and anything less is not acceptable. When you honor your own boundaries, you are teaching the world how to honor you. The second step is redefining your standards. Trauma often convinces you to settle for the bare minimum. Crumbs of affection, scraps of attention, temporary apologies. But when you begin to heal, you realize that you are worthy of consistency, kindness, and genuine love. Raising your standards does not make you difficult. It makes you aligned with your true value. The third step is choosing environments that nurture your growth. Healing cannot happen in toxic soil. If you remain in circles where disrespect is normalized, you will continue to battle the same cycles. But when you intentionally surround yourself with people who uplift, respect, and support you, your soul begins to flourish in ways you never imagined. And finally, the most important step, learning to love yourself unconditionally. Because at the root of unlearning disrespect is learning to give yourself the very love you once begged for. When you love yourself deeply, you no longer tolerate what dishonors you. You no longer shrink to make others comfortable. You no longer confuse pain with love. You see yourself clearly, and you know that respect, peace, and love are not luxuries. They are your birthright. This process of rebuilding is not just about healing from trauma. It's about stepping into your power. It's about rewriting the narrative of your life. It's about saying, my past may have shaped me, but it does not define me. I choose love. I choose respect. I choose me. So, take a deep breath right now. Release the old version of yourself, the one that accepted less than they deserved. And step into this new season where you are no longer defined by trauma, but by strength, clarity, and the unshakable knowing of your worth. Life has a way of shaping us through every experience, both the beautiful and the painful. Trauma, as heavy as it feels, has been one of the greatest teachers in your journey. It may have taught you survival, it may have made you resilient, but it also may have trained you to accept less than you deserve. And today, this realization is not meant to condemn you, but to free you. Because the moment you recognize how trauma has influenced your patterns, you gain the power to rewrite them. Think about this. Disrespect that you once tolerated was never about your worth. It was never a reflection of who you are, but a reflection of what you believed you had to accept in order to feel safe, to feel loved, or to feel seen. But now, with awareness, you don't have to repeat those cycles. You have the ability to pause, reflect, and say, this may have been my past, but it will not be my future. That is the power of awakening. Healing begins when you stop normalizing the pain and start choosing respect as your standard. Respect from others, yes, but most importantly, respect from yourself. Every time you set a boundary, every time you walk away from what diminishes you, Every time you stand in your truth, you are telling your inner child, you are safe now. You no longer have to settle. Understand this. Your healing is not selfish. It is revolutionary. Because when you unlearn the patterns of disrespect, you break generational cycles. You teach your children, your community, and everyone connected to you that love is not supposed to hurt, that loyalty is not supposed to wound, and that peace is not something you beg for. It is something you create. Yes, unlearning takes time. Yes, there will be days when the old voices whisper, "You're asking for too much," or "Maybe this is all you deserve." But those voices are not the truth. They are echoes of the past. And each time you challenge, them. Each time you choose self-respect, their power weakens. So, let this be your declaration. I am not my trauma. I am not the disrespect I tolerated. I am not the lies I was told about my worth. I am free to rewrite my story. Walk forward knowing this. Your future will not look like your past because you now hold the pen. And every page you write from this day on can be filled with love, peace, honor, and dignity. You are worthy. You are enough. And you are capable of building a life that reflects the deepest truth of your being. That you are sacred, and you deserve nothing less than respect. This is your awakening. This is your healing. And this is your time.